tries to follow through on his promise, but comes up in that. Now, the interesting thing, this idea of a cult prostitute, I want you to understand this. Cult prostitution at this time in Canaan was part of Baal and Asherah worship. Okay, Baal was the thunder god, kind of Thorish. He was the god of rain. Asherah was the fertility goddess. And the religion was practiced thus that if you slept with the cult prostitute in a religious experience, maybe Baal would sleep with Asherah and cause rain to fall upon the earth, and you would reap a bountiful harvest. So, now, putting that in perspective, this is Judah, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, worshiping Baal. So not only is he avoiding his family, not only is he avoiding the traditions of his family, not only is he dealing with any sin whatever, but he's worshiping a different God. He's avoiding God, his family's God, Yahweh, the God of the scriptures. He's worshiping Baal. Verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law has been acting like a prostitute, and now she is pregnant." "Bring her out," Judah said, "and let her be burned." As she was being brought out, she sent her father-in-law this message: "I am pregnant by the man whom these items belong." And she added, "Examine them."
I've got your driver's license.
Exactly. Whose signet ring, cord, and staff are these? Judah recognized him and said, "She is more right than I, since I did not give her my son Shelah." And he did not know her intimately again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins in her womb. And as she was giving birth, one of them put his hand out, and the midwife took it and tied scarlet thread around it, announcing this one came first. But then he pulled his hand back, and his brother came out. Then she said, "You have broken out." So he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread tied his hand, came out and was named Zerah. Okay. So Tamar ends up pregnant because she was acting like a prostitute. We won't get into the double standard of that at all, that guys are allowed to visit them, girls just aren't allowed to be them. But this gives Judah an easy out. He doesn't have to give Shelah to this woman now. She can be burned. I don't have to deal with the fact that maybe if I uphold my responsibility to this lady and let my third son marry her, I might lose my third son and lose all my lineage. I don't have to deal with that. I can just punish her for her sin and burn her. And then she says, "Well, the guy who got me pregnant has these things, and it's you." And he's like, "Well, she's more righteous than I am." I'm not sure he admits guilt in this situation. And although her sin deserves punishment, we aren't always in the place to mete out the judgment. Her sin probably needed some reckoning. She slept with her father-in-law pretending to be a prostitute. However, Judah wasn't in the place of the judge. And it reminds me of the story of the woman caught in adultery, where Jesus says, "You without sin throw the first stone." Judah actually, in a surprising way, extends grace to her. And I hope it's because he wanted a grace extended back to him. You know what? He's finally coming to a realization that he doesn't deserve what he's getting. He's done it to a point where, okay, my son died because he was evil. My son died because he was evil. My daughter-in-law and I accidentally slept together. What is that saying about my life? And maybe needs to be a little bit changed. But it's interesting. The story doesn't end there. Judah's story doesn't end there. One last passage. And this is the longest speech by any of Jacob's sons recorded in the Bible, including Joseph. And it is Judah's speech, talking to Joseph about Benjamin, his youngest brother, and to Jacob, his father, before he knows Joseph as Joseph. So this whole scene in Egypt where Joseph is the ruler of Egypt, second to the Pharaoh, dealing out all this food. And Jacob says this. Now there's more to the speech, but Genesis 44, 30 through 32. So if I come to your servant, my father, Jacob, and the boy is not with us, Benjamin, his life is wrapped up with the boy's life. When he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Then your servant will have brought the gray hairs of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. Your servant became accountable to my father for the boy, saying, if I do not return him to you, I will always bear the guilt for sinning against you, my father. Now please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the grief that would overwhelm my father. Judah is offering himself in place of Benjamin. As I think about this, I'm thinking, okay, the guy who comes up with the idea to sell Joseph into slavery, his life is just messed up. Messed up as messed up could be. I mean, you got this history. And then he, towards the end, is able to say, after all this process, is able to say, you know what, I'm willing to give my life so that Benjamin may live and so that my father may live. Now, I think about that. Now, it could have been easier. Judah could have come to a place much sooner and not gone through a lot of this stress. But it could have never happened at all either. And then we see in Matthew, the first chapter of Matthew 1 through 3, the historical record of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, from Abraham to David. Abraham fathered Isaac, Isaac fathered Jacob, Jacob fathered Judah and his brothers. Judah fathered Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez fathered Hezron, Hezron fathered Aaron. Tamar and Perez. And this mixed up piece of biblical history is somehow involved into bringing Christ into the earth. And God was able to use this and the grace extended to Judah through all this means to bring Judah to a place of some sort of, and I'm hoping some sort of repentance. He had to do some real interesting work in his life to be able to willingly to give himself up for Benjamin. Hopefully there's something there. But even later, this story, Perez, the product of this crazy life, is redefined and reworked in the message of Christ. Christ can even bring meaning to that kind of a story. And the fact that Tamar is included in the lineage of Christ, one of the few women mentioned specifically to point us to this story, in the lineage of Christ, makes it very interesting to see that Christ doesn't exclude that kind of history. When I look back on my family, when I look back on my personal life, all the stress, sin, doubt, grief that I am personally responsible for, that's responsible for of the people behind me. It can be redefined in the story of Christ. And I would not be who I am except for that. And who knows if I would even, those questions are answered. But somehow Christ can take the most messed up situation and turn it around. So Jesus' great ancestry is as messed up as mine. More so. Hopefully. I haven't uncovered all the skeletons in my family closet. Hopefully I have. No. But, and somehow God has chosen to redeem me in spite of through Christ. And that is amazing. So whatever we're going through, whatever we're dealing with, recently I've been dealing with some stuff that personally that seems to be a little bit of hereditary. Just some emotional issues that seem to be kind of tracking back a couple generations. And yet that is who I am. And Christ can meet me in the middle of that. And it's really cool. So, no matter where you are, no matter what you got there, Christ can be with you and has been, has proven himself faithful in the past.